In our last lesson, we learned about Buddha's teachings of the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. But how did those teachings get out into the world? What happened after the Buddha reached enlightenment? Well, for the next several decades, Buddha traveled around the region to teach others, but he was not alone. The Buddha's teachings attracted a diverse group of followers, from kings to commoners. Some became monks or nuns, people who devoted their lives completely to practicing and sharing the message of the Buddha. Finally, at the old age of 80, Buddha became ill and died. It was believed that he had at last attained nirvana, a release from the cycle of death and rebirth. His followers wondered, what would become of his teachings now? Welcome back to the Library of Faith, curious souls! Let's turn the page and find out more together. So, what did happen to Buddha's first followers after he died? Well, they formed the Sangha, a community of monks who dedicated their lives to practicing Buddhism by renouncing worldly possessions and focusing on meditation, study, and teaching others. The Sangha wanted more than anything to preserve Buddha's teachings. Why do you think it was so important to them to collect and keep these teachings? Well, they wanted Buddha's teachings to benefit future generations, so it was crucial to preserve them accurately and consistently. Having a written record also ensured unity within the Buddhist community and protected the teachings from misinterpretation. But this was no easy task. The Sangha held the first Buddhist council with 500 of Buddha's closest followers. Just imagine it. 500 followers reciting and compiling Buddha's ideas into 3 written collections, known as the Tripitaka, which means the 3 baskets. These texts were carefully preserved on wood blocks and scrolls and transmitted through generations. But how were they spread to more distant lands? Over the next several centuries, Buddhism began to spread across Asia in 3 main ways. The first way was through the establishment of monasteries and universities. A monastery is a place of communal living and worship for monks. Many of the earliest monasteries were formed out of caves like these. Later, monasteries were more permanent structures and were often built as complexes combined with universities. Check out the remains of the ancient monastery and university at Nalanda in northeastern India. Here you could have found thousands of students and monks. Many came from far away for education and training. Here they meditated and sought to understand the profound truths the Buddha had discovered. How do you think these monasteries helped spread Buddhism? Well, these scholars and students came from other parts of Asia. Then they brought their newfound knowledge back home with them, and this facilitated the spread of Buddhist teachings. The second main method of spreading Buddhism was through missionaries. A missionary is someone sent to promote and spread their religion in different regions. In the 3rd century BCE, Emperor Ashoka converted to, or decided to follow, Buddhism. He then sent missionaries to far-off lands. What modern-day countries did Ashoka's missionaries spread Buddhism to? They spread Buddhism to Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar, and even further into parts of West Asia. The third main way was through trade. How do you think trade might facilitate the spread of religion? Think back for a moment. You might remember learning about the Silk Road in world history. What was it again? That's right, the ancient network of trade routes that connected the East and West, running from China through Central Asia to the Mediterranean. Buddhist monks and traders traveled these routes, carrying Buddhist texts, relics, and art. As they moved from one region to another, they introduced Buddhism to new cultures and societies where it often blended with local traditions. So, Buddhism was spread both intentionally with the establishment of monasteries and the dispatch of missionaries, and as a byproduct of trade. But where did it spread? Now let's take a closer look at where Buddhism established itself in different regions of Asia. Notice this island nation off the southeast coast of India. Nowadays, it's called Sri Lanka. Let's visit a monastery just outside of the capital city of Colombo. Here's a statue of Mahinda, a Buddhist monk and the son of Emperor Ashoka. Why do you think there's a statue of this Buddhist monk here? Maybe you guessed that Mahinda was responsible for bringing Buddhism to Sri Lanka. And he did. Ancient monasteries and stupas still stand today as testaments to Buddhism's lasting influence in Sri Lanka. Also in Sri Lanka is a tree that Buddhists believe is descended from the original Bodhi tree under which Buddha meditated and reached enlightenment. That's pretty amazing. Now here's another Buddhist monastery, but this doesn't look like India or Sri Lanka. Where do you think we are now? Did you guess China? That's right! Buddhism traveled along the Silk Road to China around the 1st century CE. At first, people were curious about Buddhism, but later it became integrated into Chinese culture, often blending with local philosophies such as Taoism and Confucianism. How do you think that might have helped Buddhism be more easily accepted? This blending helped make Buddhism seem more familiar and easier to adopt. For example, some Buddhist ideas about compassion and ethical living fit in well with the local values and principles. In fact, look at the 3 men in this picture. What do you see? Notice how they are all laughing together? These men are actually meant to symbolize Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, and the painting shows how well they all got along. From China, Buddhism spread to Korea in the 4th century CE, and by the 6th century, Korean monks had brought Buddhism across to the islands of Japan. The Japanese adapted Buddhism to coexist with Shinto, the indigenous religion. Just like in China, this made Buddhism more appealing to the local people. Now where are we? This doesn't look like anywhere we've been so far. I think we're in Southeast Asia now. Traders brought Buddhism to Southeast Asia through both overland and maritime trade routes. In Cambodia, Buddhism coexisted with Hinduism for many centuries. The magnificent temple complex of Angkor Wat, originally a Hindu temple, was gradually transformed into a Buddhist site. In Myanmar, the Shwedagon Pagoda stands as a symbol of the deep-rooted presence of Buddhism in the country. Look at the sheer size and beauty of these 2 buildings. What does their appearance tell us about the spread and importance of Buddhism in these regions? We can tell from the size and appearance that people in power were hugely supportive of Buddhism. They spent immense resources creating long-lasting, extravagant monuments to the religion. So, we've traveled from India throughout South Asia over to China, Korea, and Japan, and finally here in Southeast Asia. That's quite a journey. Let's wrap up our final chapter for today. The spread of Buddhism from its origins in ancient India across Asia and beyond is a testament to the enduring power of the Buddha's teachings. Next time, we'll dig deeper into how these teachings have evolved and adapted to different cultures across Asia. As always, until our next chapter, stay curious, friends!
Hey.